Is the Vandy revival a real thing?
You are Locked On Vandy, your daily podcast on the Vanderbilt Commodores, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Vandy podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Corey Burton. Thanks for making Locked On Vandy your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's episode, we're going to explore who the most impactful players will be and what impactful truly means. Also, we decide what the strength of the team is. But before that, Clark Lea did some major renovations to the program. Is this revival a real thing? I believe that it is. And honestly, it's going to look different than what you're expecting. I know like this whole revival thing, and usually when you're talking revival, you're thinking, 8, 9, 10 wins and contention for conference championships in a really nice bowl game and all that good stuff. But like when you look at the context of what it means for a program like Vandy, I think this revival thing is a real thing. Okay. Think about it. The last time Clark Lea called the defense and was in charge of the defense, was really locked in, they went 5-7 and were on the cusp of a bowl game. They were a few bad plays away from being a bowl team that year. I think they have added way more talent this year. And I think with kind of some things that he's overhauled, I think he's learned a lot from all of his experiences because I think he's been fairly experimental. So, yes, I'm very much buying into the overhaul. I'm very much buying into this idea of a revival. And I'm still very much buying into the fact that Vandy's going to be a bowl team. And as we go through the summer, as we progress through the summer, we'll have some segments where we start to kind of look at our opponents and look at the schedule and just kind of really do a little bit deeper of a dive. We're going to do some crossover episodes and things of that nature with some other people from around the network to really kind of get a picture of what we're dealing with some of these teams that Vandy has to play. And so I think that this, again, and you're going to call me crazy. I get it. Pump the brakes, you're going to say. I don't care. Vandy's going to be a bowl team. The revival is real. The overhaul is real. I think Clark Lea, I think something has clicked. Now, I was on SEC After Dark, and I was saying about Vandy's revival and about what's going on there and how things are looking. Honestly, I still think they have a ways to go as far as building the roster. I really love what Clark Lea has done in the transfer portal and bringing in talent. I think finally participating in NIL, finally participating in being active in getting transfer portal recruits and good ones that fit what you need has been great. And I think that's going to be a massive reason as to why, because these are guys that come from winning programs, right? They're not all just loser cast-offs, and none of these college football players are loser cast-offs, but you kind of get what I mean. Like a cast-off from a program that can't win, those guys don't truly have a lot of impact for various reasons. But, I think you're getting guys that, like Jeremiah Dillon coming from Ole Miss. He was a player, a very talented 4-star recruit coming into Ole Miss, but he comes into a loaded wide receiver room, can't quite crack the lineup, but still wants to stay in the SEC, comes over to Vandy, now probably going to be wide receiver 1. You have guys like Loic Foungy, who was beat up, has injuries, really good framework, really good potential, just don't know what he has because he hasn't really played a whole lot, but he's a big target, and that's always nice. You got guys like, you got the entire New Mexico State roster to the point where it's the Vandy State Aggie doors. Those guys are impact guys, and those guys are buying into the culture, and those are the guys that are going to make this thing a real thing. When you overhaul your operation, you get fresh ideas, you get fresh things in there. Like the best move of the entire overhaul was bringing in Jerry Kill, because he's a successful head coach. And the only reason he's not a head coach He was not fired. He had to bow out because of health reasons. He's won everywhere. He had back-to-back 10-win seasons at New Mexico State, a team that's been a doormat in the WAC conference, and now I think they're in the Conference USA or Mountain West. I don't even know what conference they're in. That kind of tells you like what kind of program they are at New Mexico State. Like that's been like a program where you're just like, who? What? And they won. They went and beat Auburn at Auburn. And the quarterback that did it is now on Vandy's roster. And you have the offensive coordinator who's an outside the box thinker. That's part of the overhaul. And you have Jerry Kill, who's very instrumental in directing Clark Lea and saying, hey, this is what needs to happen. He goes, I'm here so you can concentrate on defense. We can kind of tag team this thing. We got this. Like he's probably giving advice left and right. And I think a lot of the right buttons are being pressed. They've hired some really good assistants, guys that know the system, obviously, some really good guys defensively. Clark Lea taking over the defense is another very underrated part. I think his biggest mistake was giving that up and stepping back into a more overseeing CEO type role. I think that was a massive mistake. It was a huge mistake. And he's realized that. And I don't think he ever fired the guy, but he demoted him, and then he eventually dipped out because he was just like, yeah, I see what's happening here. So that kind of thing. Like those are the moves that you look at and say, is this overhaul real? Well, yeah, I believe in it because Clark Lea was a great defense coordinator. Always had top 20 defenses at Notre Dame. Always very progressive thinker as far as defense goes, very aggressive style, which is what you need in the SEC, especially what you need at a place like Vanderbilt, when you don't have a lot of depth, and they still don't have a lot of depth. And that's probably the biggest concern. I'll get to that in a minute. But if you don't have a lot of depth, you have to go outside the box a little bit with what you do. Offensively, they're going to go outside the box a little bit, right, in the way they do things. On defense, they're going to go outside the box a little bit. They're not going to play some of your standard defense. They're going to start to get kind of funky with their defenses, and he's going to experiment. And that's, I think he's taken over the defense. And I think, if I had to guess, I think he wants to do this a little bit differently than he did. I think he probably stepped back too far and too fast last year when he was trying to have his little protege type situation like Kirby did at Georgia, Nick Saban did at Alabama. Those programs, every program where the head coach steps back to become more of a head coach and kind of passes the reins of coordinatorship to a protege. Kirby did that masterfully with Dan Lanning, where he was heavily involved. And I think even the first year he called it. And then he kind of just gradually stepped back, and he's still involved. But he stepped back and let Dan Lanning have full control of it. But he's just there. He's right there for quality control. I think Clark Lea is doing that. And I think he's got some guys in mind. I don't know exactly who it is at this moment, but I think this year you're going to see Clark Lea really implement what he wants to do in his style of play calling. And I think he's grooming somebody to take over as defensive coordinator so that he can step back into that head coaching role. But I also think when he steps back, he's going to do it a little bit slower than he did before. That way he doesn't really just let go of the reins, and then the thing runs wild and it gets out of control and you can't handle it anymore. So, those are the type of things that I foresee with Vanderbilt on defense with Clark Lea. Is the overhaul real? Are we buying in? Yes. Another move that should have you fired up. Go watch clips of Coach Steiner, the new strength coach. Go watch those clips. If you don't get fired up with him, I don't think they've had a strength coach like that. And I would challenge you to. I might even go back come back through social media. I don't remember Vandy showcasing a strength coordinator before on social media. They've overhauled that team too. Their social media presence is bigger, and better. I think I was trying to mash up those words, but I think it's better. They're more out there. They're producing better content, both still imagery and video content. Like I think the social media teams are crushing it, right? And they're promoting the program, which is great for recruiting, great for publicity, great for transfer portal, great for a lot of things, great for what I'm talking about right now. Are we buying in, right? So they're featuring the strength coach more, and that might just be a product of that. But like, I don't feel like they've had one that's been worthy of that. And the results show the depth, the injuries, the vast strength gap between Vandy and the next SEC team on the list, which was, I think, Mississippi State, right? So you look at those factors, Vandy's most definitely going to be stronger. Look at some of these early enrollee freshmen. If you don't believe in what Vandy's doing in strength and conditioning, look at what those guys looked like in January when they stepped on campus to now. They're totally different people, totally different bodies, totally different mindset. There's more competitiveness. The overall culture of competitive spirit has really kind of taken over Vanderbilt. And I know culture is such a buzzword. I know you guys probably roll your eyes and say, oh, it's another buzzword, but let's be real about it. It's way more competitive now. And there's guys that are talking trash to each other, trying to hype each other up, trying to get each other the best they can out of practice. There's a lot more one-on-ones. That whole behind the scenes and spring practice thing that Vandy did on SEC Network Plus was phenomenal. It gave you a really way more candid look into Vandy's program than I thought they would ever do or ever allow. So there's things like that. And that's just the tip of the sword. But, new strength coach, buying it. Clark Lea taking over the defense and probably eventually handing it over to somebody, but a lot slower this time, buying it. The combination of Jerry Kill and Tim Beck, or I guess the trio of those two guys and Diego Pavia, buying it. Active in transfer portal, tapping into NIL, buying it. They're doing it. Rebuilding the offensive line and getting quality players. Still not as deep as you want to be, but they got quality players. Buying it, right? I love the direction of this program. I think it's heading in the right direction. I think bowl game. I'm thinking bowl game. Thinking bowl game. But like, what's the strength of the team though? You're going to have to hang on because I'm going to talk about that next. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right. Are you watching ESPN or Fox Sports? Are you tired of all that shouting? I know I would be. It's exhausting, which is why you need to make the switch to Locked On Sports Today. That's right. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Speaking of you everydayers, shout out to you guys. You guys make this all possible. I appreciate each and every one of you, and this is amazing. So, Make sure you check on Locked On SEC next. Chris Gordy does a phenomenal job. I'm pretty sure I'll probably go back on his show here in a little while. But man, it's phenomenal, man. The growth of this show, and I think sky's the limit here. I think we're just tapping into it. We're still very young. Well, it's still very young over here at Locked On Vandy. So my goal is to take over the conference. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm gonna take on the conference. Vandy fans, you can help me. Anyway, so what's the strength of the team? Okay. Overhaul. I'm buying it. I'm buying the overhaul. I'm buying into it. I think it's great. I think he's done a phenomenal job. I would say that if I was a Tennessee fan. I'm not, but I would say that if I was. Right? I would say it if I was a Florida fan. I'd be like, oh, dude, look up there. Nashville. They're doing something up there. Wow. Okay. Clark Lea, maybe he's not so bad. Right? He's woken up. He's learned. Right? It's exciting. But what's the strength of the team? Now, I was asked that by a friend of mine. Like, what? Like, we're talking Vandy football. And, what's the strength of the team? You know, Corey, you do the Locked On Vandy podcast. What's the strength of the team? Well, I told him two things. I said, you really kind of got to break it down when you're ranking the strength of the team. You really kind of break it down two sides, right? Offense, defense, and then you kind of just trade back and forth, right? The strength of the team offense is going to be the quarterback. And I know that's such a cliche answer, but it is possible for other position groups on the offense to prop up the quarterback. I think it's going to be the other way around. I think Diego Pavia is going to prop up all the other position groups. And here's why. And I think the quarterback position is deep, right? And it's a whole different topic for another show because I want to do a deeper dive into this for more than just a sentence or two. But it is very possible there's a two quarterback system here, and it could work. Nate Johnson is just as good. And if Diego Pavia never stepped foot, Nate Johnson would probably be the unquestioned starter. All right. Blaise Berlowitz, another really talented quarterback. Drew Dickey, talented in his own right. I just don't think he does anything outstandingly better than the other two. Then you have Jeremy St. Hilaire and Whit Muschamp coming in as freshmen. Jack Elliott on the hook as a commit. So the future of the quarterback position is very, very bright, and it is a absolute strength, right? And I think you can do some damage there. But I think the leadership of that position is going to be key. I think all the other position groups are going to play as the quarterback plays, right? So as the offensive line plays, I think it's going to be determined on, well, is the quarterback getting the ball out? Is the quarterback making the right reads on RPOs? Is the quarterback, running to the right spots? Is Pavia finishing runs? Are they moving the sticks, right? And as Pavia is doing that, or if Pavia's not in, as Nate Johnson or whoever's in at quarterback, as they're doing that, the offensive line is getting a little more confidence, a little more juice. The receivers are running around a little extra hard. The running backs are doing their thing, right? But it all starts with the quarterback. And I know it's very cliche to say, well, yeah, it all starts with the quarterback. But again, there's been teams where the quarterback play, separate of everything else, has been average, subpar, slightly above average, nothing special to write home about. But you put them with a really great offensive line, and they're phenomenal. You put them with really great receivers, they're phenomenal. Things like that where, it's more complimentary. This one, I think it's going to, obviously it's going to start with the quarterback and kind of trickle down from there. Defensively, it's definitely the secondary. Definitely the secondary, and then it works to the linebackers, to the edge guys, and then to the defensive line. But I think secondary by far is the best position. And it's a toss up. I know I said cornerbacks were the best and deep, and they are deep, but safeties are pretty deep in their own right, with Dericky Wright, CJ Taylor, Randon Fontenette, Dante Carter, and Maurice Hampton in that position group as well. So I think when you look at the secondary as a whole, I think you would say that, hey, we have to as a group, those two groups are impactful because it's hey, we have to, the quarterback is multifaceted. So we have to we have to really people aren't game planning for Vandy's offensive line. If they were a strength of the team, they would be. They're not game planning yet for the receivers. They could emerge as a strength of the team. It's not final. It's not locked and set in stone, right? We could get week 3, and next thing you know, the defensive line is best in the conference, right? So, you never know what could happen there. So, but as of right now, on June 20th, secondary is the best as a strength of the team. Vandy's going to have a phenomenal secondary. Very talented. Pretty deep. Deepest group. These are the 2 deepest groups of the team. Quarterback and I'm just going to lump secondary together. Safeties and corners are both deep, right? I think that's going to allow them to do a lot of things creatively, and I think that also makes the overhaul a real thing because you're able to do more because you have more, and it helps the other units, right? I think that's the strength of the team. So if you had to point blank ask me, that's what you're dealing with. But so when you look at those units, who are the impact players within those units? We'll talk about that next. All right, Locked On Vandy. We're wrapping up here. It is the Locked On Vandy podcast. Thank you for making us part of your day. Thank you for making us your first listen. It's Commodores every day, and we are excited to bring you that. So in that same vein, we're talking about impact players, man. But if you want to be an impact player as a fan, make sure you listen to Locked On SEC after this. Make sure you listen to College Sports Today after this. Make sure you listen to the other host of shows in the SEC. On the Locked On Network, Locked On Ole Miss, Locked On Auburn, Locked On Georgia, to name a few. Those are extremely, really good shows. Locked On LSU, Caroline Fenton does a really, really good job there. She is phenomenal. So if you haven't listened to her, do yourself a favor and do that because she's really good and she makes things really interesting and she gives a great point of view on LSU. So, impact players, okay. Well, we got to first define what impactful means or impact players mean, okay? Because that's a buzzword, right? It's this guy's an impact player. This guy's an impact player. You just look at the stats and go, okay, he was a leader in tackles. He's an impact player, right? But what does truly impact mean? And to me, the simple definition of an impact player is someone opponents will have to spend time or most of their time game planning for, and someone who can truly affect the outcome of the game. So the obvious one is Diego Pavia. He's an impact player. He's the quarterback, but he's also the leader of a positional group of strength, right? But he's an impact player. Langston Patterson, although not on the strongest unit overall on the team, he's an impact player. Because he's such an animal, such a disruptor at the linebacker position, you have to physically game plan for him. You have to figure out where number 10 is. How can we block number 10 in our run scheme? How can we account for number 10 in our pass protection? How can we account for these guys, right? CJ Taylor's the same way. He's an impact player because teams have to figure out what he's doing because he can do so many different things. They have to spend time game planning for that. And hey, well, what if we have the ball right hash on the 30? What are we going to do? CJ Taylor's in the boundary. He's going to disrupt the coverage this way. Those are things that teams are going to have to look at, right? You have to figure out what's going to happen. And I think Clark Lea has the luxury of being able to make that a nightmare with those two guys and being able to do a bunch of different things. And so when you think about impact players, that's what you think about. Like Diego Pavia, he's an impact player because he's a quarterback, but he's an impact player. Yeah, that's the obvious reason. But if you look deeper into that, why is he an impact player at the quarterback position? What makes him an impact player? What makes him not just the dude? He's tough. He's a physical runner. He's accurate. He's not terribly great down the field, but he's accurate. He's somebody that can do a lot of different things. He's a leader, and he's just a dude. He's a guy that's going to get other guys to play their role. He's going to be able to get you checked into right plays. He's going to be able to lead the guys in helping them understand what's happening and what's going on. So to me, when you think impact player, that's what I think of. Guys that truly impact the game. So like who is the other team going to have to game plan for? What are they going to have to spend time worrying about? Langston Patterson, they're going to have to spend time worrying about Langston Patterson. As I said, how do we stop him from disrupting and destroying our run game and making our run game a non-factor? Like how are we going to stop him? Right? He's the one that stands out on film. CJ Taylor, is he going to be down on the line of scrimmage? Is he going to be middle of the field? Are they going to play a two shell? Like the offensive coordinators are looking at that film and going, he's a problem. We got to fix that. How are we going to manage this? He's just patrolling over there in the secondary. Like, how are we going to do that? Right? It's like, how are we going to play deep coverage on that? How are we going to do this? You look out at the cornerback position, Mark Davis and Marlon Jones, they were on a very nice list. And if you want to know what that list is, it's this one. I talked about it on yesterday's show. That's the list. Those are impact players. Why? Because you have to figure out how to game plan with them. You have to figure out how are they going to play us? How are they going to play our receivers? How is our receivers going to handle them, jamming them? And how are they going to handle them talking trash? Those are impact players, right? Mark Davis, Marlon Jones. How is a slot receiver going to feel lining up against a 6'4" corner? Colby Taylor's a corner. He moves and plays like a corner. But he looks like an edge player. What are they going to do with that? How do you game plan for that? He's an impact player. He's going to impact the outcome of the game because if you don't account for him, he will make you pay. Right now, there are no defensive linemen that I think stand out. But if you had one, be an impact player. But right now, I think just the unit of the defensive line, I don't know that teams are overly worried about them. Right? I don't think teams are overly worried about Vandy's offensive line, partially because Vandy's offensive line hasn't been established yet, so you don't know what five to game plan for. But I imagine, you're gonna figure that out, and you'll see. Okay, well this run scheme runs through the center. The center gets everything set up, so we got to affect the center. Who does your game plan have to affect? When you look at impact players, who does your game plan have to affect? And who can affect your game plan, right? Those two things. Like, who do you have to attack? Who can make your game plan go to complete waste? Right? That's the answer. All right. What are these freshmen? Dante Carter's going to be in the freshman I talked about. Jamison Curtis, he's in line for the star position, edge position. He may even play some inside linebacker in some packages. How does he affect the game? Because he's going to be here, there, and everywhere, right? Possibly. He may not be high enough on the depth chart to really be an impact player, but that star position could be. That could be Randon Fontenette. Like, how does he impact the game? That's what you have to look at when you look at impact players. All right, Cedric Alexander. I think he's going to impact it. I think he's going to be an impact player because he's going to be such a versatile runner that you can't really like Vandy. I don't think Vandy has established a run scheme that you have to watch out for, like an impact scheme that, like, hey, Cedric Alexander is a great outside zone runner. You have to account for that, and you have to fit that in different ways. I don't think we're there yet. So I think it's a little early for Cedric Alexander, but he's on the hey, he's going to be an impact player. We just don't know how yet, but I think he's talent-wise. I think he's going to be. I think you're going to see one of these receivers emerge as an impact player. We just don't know how the passing game is going to be married to the run game just yet. We don't know where the strength of the passing game is yet. That hasn't emerged because we really didn't have that last year. there really wasn't a guy that fit into a scheme. I think that's part of the reason why Vandy was 2-10 last year, because they didn't have that. They didn't have an identity. This year they're going to have an identity, and you're going to figure out who the impact players are within that identity. So what did we learn today? Well, we learned that the revival, I think, is a very real thing. It may not be a 10-win, 9-win situation, but it's certainly going to be a 6-win situation. I truly believe that. I think with everything they've done, overhaul-wise, I truly believe that. Corey, you're crazy. That's okay. We're going to leave you there. All right. Well, we hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you back here tomorrow, and we'll get you into the weekend very, very soon. Anchor down.